You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. What I see that may be difficult for people of faith, Christians, Catholics, to try and put together is the connections between what is really happening and what's being portrayed by the church, because I believe that there has been an infiltration into Abrahamic religions and to the church in general. There are dark forces that have infiltrated not only the church, but all areas of our material reality to try and control humans in different ways. But this makes it difficult for people of faith to discern the events that are unfolding from what they're being told by the church that is the truth, right?
Absolutely. You're 100% right. If you go to my website, you will see, if you go to the About Me section, which is on the homepage, the first thing I say is, I am not religious. And what I mean by that is I don't conform to what religion is. Religion is man-made. Religion, the definition of religion, are the things that human beings do in order to get closer to what they consider to be divine. Okay, so, you don't have to be a person of faith to be religious. I think I gave this example on when I was on Tinfoil Hat briefly before I had some technical issues. I said that if you are an atheist and you brush your teeth every morning at 7 a.m., you're brushing your teeth religiously. Why? Because that's what you're doing to get to what you consider good. So, but it's all man-made rules. So, and those rules come from these entities these institutions that we call churches, whether it be the Catholic Church or whether it be Protestant churches. And I have a lot to say about Catholics on Catholicism, not Catholics. I'm having a problem with the Catholic people. I have a problem with the Catholic hierarchy in the Vatican. And I make sure I distinguish that on my site. But, Protestants are just as guilty as this, having this religiosity that is not legitimate. I just had a conversation with a good friend of mine before this episode. We were talking about Calvinism. John Calvin being one of the so-called fathers of modern Protestantism, but Calvinism leads you away from God, and I talk about that on my site and in my series in Revelation when I look at the Church of Sardis. But to get back specifically to what you were saying about it being infiltration, yes, there's been infiltration from day one. Keep in mind that, again, behind the human evil is spiritual evil, and they are older than us, smarter than us. They know more and they know how to infiltrate. So as soon as even again, you talk about the life of Jesus in the first century, he, lives, dies, resurrects, and around 30 to 40 AD. And then you have the apostles, Paul and Peter, whatever, they're writing their letters that make up the New Testament. But before that century is even out, you already have letters in the Bible telling people about how folks are coming in and corrupting the new faith of Christianity. So Jesus was only off earth for a couple of decades, and already there were people coming in to infiltrate it and sow in false doctrine into what the legitimate doctrine is. So yeah, that absolutely happens, and it's on us as believers, as Christians, as Catholics, as people of faith to suss out the differences between what is legitimate and what is not. And that's why we have the Bible, and that needs to be our true north. And that's what we have to use to say, okay, how close does this actually match what we legitimately know to be true from the scriptures? And and I know that people will say, well, the scriptures have been corrupted. I don't know if you want to go there, but here's the thing with whenever someone says, the Bible's been changed over the years, I'm like, okay, well, how do you prove that something is counterfeit? Let's say if I were to say, if you were to take me to court, if I owed you $100, Chris, and I gave you a $100 bill, and it had Joe Biden face on it, you would say this isn't legitimate. I'm saying, oh no, it is. This is a legitimate $100 bill, and we go to court. Well, Chris, how would you prove that the bill I gave you was fraudulent? Well, you would show a legitimate $100 bill with Benjamin Franklin on it. So you have to show the original and then compare that to the counterfeit. The same thing with the Bible. How do you know if the Bible has been corrupted? Well, then you need something as close to the original as possible, and you compare that to the corruption. Well, fortunately, we had a few decades ago, actually almost 50, 60, maybe 80 years ago, we had the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so you had this source of documents where some of them were dated back to the 3rd century BC. So, pretty old documents. And when they were compared to the Bible that we have today, especially when you look at the King James Version, it was virtually identical. There was like a copy of the complete book of Isaiah that, aside from some punctuation and some grammar, was the same as the book of Isaiah that we have now. We also have copies of several of the Gospels, like, for example, the Gospel of Matthew that was dated from the 1st century, which again are pretty close to what was already there. So we can have some confidence that we have a good version of it. Now, is it perfect? No, but the flaws are already very, very well known by scholars. So I look at what people are saying when they interpret the Bible versus what the Bible actually says.
Right. Excellent point. Now let's get to some of your talking points. First, starting with the active predictive programming when it pertains to what the elites are showing us in our everyday reality from Hollywood and media and beyond, as it also connects to the principle of as above, so below. Tell us a little bit about your understanding of that.
Sure. So sure, as soon as you said as above, so below, like any of the Christians listening are like, oh, that's satanic. It's a principle. And I really want to make that known that principles are not good or evil. They just are. And it depends on how it's being used. So predictive programming, that is, and I'm sure your listeners know the definition, but I'll just give it quickly. Predictive programming is this odd practice that the elites, whoever you want to call them, the Illuminati, the Club of Rome, the 13 families, I just call them the elites, that they seem to this practice they have of essentially telling us or showing us what they're going to do before they do it, which seems counterintuitive because there's a very small group of people, very, very few of them, relatively speaking. So their biggest weakness is the fact that there's far more of us than there are of them. And their biggest danger are the majority of people getting wise to what they're doing, and there's nothing they could physically do to stop us from stopping them. So why do they do predictive programming? And I've heard a few explanations about it, none of which really resonate well. Like some will say, well, they're giving us a fair shot. They say, we'll tell them what we're going to do, and if they stop us, then they stop us. Well, these aren't really fair-minded people, so I don't really buy that. Then sometimes I've heard people say that it's because of justice or karma, that they're saying that they can say, well, we told them what we were going to do and they still fell for it, so we're off the hook. Well, that's not how justice or karma works. But then I heard that it's really about magic. It's about sorcery. That perked my ears up because I know these people practice sorcery at the highest levels and so-called magic. And when you talk about magic at the very lowest level, magic needs three things. I mean, you think of a kid with, pulling a rabbit out of a hat. What do you need? You need the magician, you need the magic trick, as it were, and you need the audience. So maybe they are revealing things before they happen because they need to have the audience be ready for it. You say, look at the hat, there's nothing in it. Oh, here's a rabbit. So that had a kernel of truth to it. But as I started doing more research into the spiritual side, I realized that what's really happening with predictive programming is not something they're doing because they want to do it, or because they want to warn us or give us a fair shot. They are practicing actually a spiritual principle of as above, so below. It's a principle that not only the evil spiritual entities practice, but that the God of the Bible himself does the exact same thing. So that's why they're doing it. So let's just be clear that the elites, whoever they are, I don't really try to focus on who they are because they're not at the top of the pyramid. It doesn't matter who they are, whether the Rockefellers or Rothschild, the 13 families, whomever. At the top of the pyramid are spiritual entities that you can call fallen angels. I don't like that term because angel, from the Greek angelos, just means messenger. That's what it means. And they're called angels or angelos in the Bible because usually when people encounter them, that's what they're doing. They're giving a message to a human being about something.